Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies, and this is 47th Problem from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry by Albert G. Mackey. 47th Problem. The 47th problem of Euclid's first book, which has been adopted as a symbol in the master's degree, is thus enunciated. In any right-angled triangle, the square which is described upon the side subtending the right angle is equal to the squares described upon the sides which contain the right angle. Thus, in a triangle whose perpendicular is 3 feet, the square of which is 9, and whose base is 4 feet, the square of which is 16, the hypotenuse or subtending side will be 5 feet, the square of which will be 25, which is the sum of 9 and 16. The interesting problem, on account of its great utility in making calculations and drawing plans for buildings, is sometimes called the Carpenter's Theorem. For the demonstration of this problem, the world is indebted to Pythagoras, who, it is said, was so elated after making the discovery that he made an offering of a hecatomb, or a sacrifice of 100 oxen, to the gods. The devotion to learning which this religious act indicated in the mind of the ancient philosopher has induced Masons to adopt the problem as a memento, instructing them to be lovers of the arts and sciences. The triangle, whose base is 4 parts, whose perpendicular is 3, and whose hypotenuse is 5, and which would exactly serve for a demonstration of this problem, was, according to Plutarch, a symbol frequently employed by the Egyptian priest, and here is called by M. Jomard in the following work, The Egyptian Triangle. It was, with the Egyptians, the symbol of universal nature, the base representing Osiris, or the male principle, the perpendicular, Isis, or the female principle, and the hypotenuse, Horus, the sun, or the produce of the 2 principles. They added that 3 was the first perfect odd number, that 4 was the square of 2, the first even number, and that 5 was the result of 3 and 2. But the Egyptians made a still more important use of this triangle. It was the standard of all their measures of extent, and was applied by them of the building of the pyramids. The researches of M. Jomard on the Egyptian system of measures, published in the magnificent work of the French savants on Egypt, has placed us completely in possession of the uses made by the Egyptians of this 47th problem of Euclid, and of the triangle which formed the diagram by which it was demonstrated. If we inscribe within a circle a triangle, whose perpendicular shall be 300 parts, whose base shall be 400 parts, and whose hypotenuse shall be 500 parts, which, of course, bear the same proportion to each other as 3, 4, and 5. Then if we let a perpendicular fall from the angle of the perpendicular and base to the hypotenuse, and extend it through the hypotenuse to the circumference of the circle, this chord or line will be equal to 480 parts, and the 2 segments of the hypotenuse on each side of it will be found equal, respectively, to 180 and 320. From the point where this chord intersects the hypotenuse, let another line fall perpendicularly to the shortest side of the triangle, and this line will be equal to 144 parts, while the shorter segment formed by its conjunction with the perpendicular side of the triangle will be equal to 108 parts. Hence we may derive the following measures from the diagram: 500, 480, 400, 320, 180, 144, and 108. And all these without the slightest fraction. Supposing then the 500 to be cubits, we have the measure of the base of the Great Pyramid of Memphis. In the 400 cubits of the base of the triangle, we have the exact length of the Egyptian stadium. The 320 gives us the exact number of Egyptian cubits contained in the Hebrew and Babylonian stadium. The stadium of Ptolemy is represented by the 480 cubits, or the length of the line falling from the right angle to the circumference of the circle through the hypotenuse. The number 180 which expresses the smaller segment of the hypotenuse being doubled, will give 360 cubits, which will be the stadium of Cleomenes. By doubling the 144, the result will be 288 cubits, or the length of the stadium of Archimedes. And by doubling the 108, we produce 216 cubits, or the precise value of the Lesser Egyptian stadium. In this manner, we obtain from this triangle all the measures of length that were in use among the Egyptians. And since this triangle, whose sides are equal to 3, 4, and 5, was the very one that most naturally would be used in demonstrating the 47th problem of Euclid, and since, by these three sides, the Egyptians symbolized Osiris, Isis, and Horus, or the two producers and the product, the very principle expressed in symbolic language, which constitutes the terms of the problem, as enunciated by Pythagoras, that the sum of the squares of the two sides will produce the square of the third, will have no reason to doubt that the 47th problem was well known to the Egyptian priest, and by them communicated to Pythagoras. Dr. Lardner, in his edition of Euclid, says, whether we consider the 47th proposition with reference to the peculiar and beautiful relation established in it, or to its innumerable uses in every department of mathematical science, or to its fertility in the consequences derivable from it, it must certainly be esteemed the most celebrated and important in the whole of the elements, if not in the whole range, of mathematical science. It is by the influence of this proposition, and that which establishes the similitude of equiangular triangles in the 6th book, that geometry has been brought under the dominion of algebra, and it is upon the same principle that the whole science of trigonometry is founded. The 32nd and 47th propositions are said to have been discovered by Pythagoras, and extraordinary accounts are given of his exaltation upon his first perception of their truth. It is, however, supposed by some that Pythagoras acquired a knowledge of them in Egypt, and was the first to make them known in Greece. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.